Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for making the effort to come to the session. I don't think I've actually seen a tech conference session well, definitely not one I've ever presented. So we definitely appreciate that. We're going to be talking about the Common Data Service this morning. My name's Clay Wesner. Some of you from the Dynamics 365 for Operations group may know me in the past. I used to work with AX for about 12 years and most recently the Power BI integration. I'm now the PM for the Common Data Model, which is the schema and the artifacts that sit within the Common Data Service.
And my name is John O'Luck. I'm the Group Program Manager for the Common Data Service. Actually, I'm fairly new to Dynamics. I have a sordid past. I've been in Power BI, Office 365, SharePoint Online specifically, and helped start Azure Active Directory. So been in the services world just all over the company. And now I'm here. So I'm excited to meet everyone and talk about the Common Data Service. All right, so what are we actually going to talk about? We'll do a quick run through of what the Common Data Service is. We'll speak to sort of where we're at right now, what you can do with it, and then plans looking forward, where we're going, where the journey we want to take with you over the next quarters, months, years. So, we'll start with what is the Common Data Service? It's the platform from Microsoft that will enable customers to easily build apps and processes that they need for their business. That's what we strive to do. And over the next 77 minutes, we'll talk about some of the details behind what that entails. What are the features? What are the scenarios? Why you should care? When you should use the Common Data Service. So keep us honest on that. We have questions and answers at the end as well. How many folks have seen this slide before? Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. The main thing I want to call out, and I apologize, we don't really have a laser pointer here. What the takeaways are the following. Everything we do, built on Azure. That is the infrastructure foundation for our service. We build on Service Fabric. We use all varieties of Azure storage under the hood. We play in this space, the application platform. Our goal is to enable you and your customers or your partners to build apps and processes using our tools. So how many folks have used Power Apps before? Oh, okay, so a decent number. And Flow? Power BI Embedded. So I actually worked on Power BI Embedded right before this project, so that's near and dear to my heart. And then us, the Common Data Service. We constitute what we believe to be the new foundation for Microsoft's business app platform. With Power Apps, as you've probably seen, you can easily build applications. Flow, you can automate. With Power BI, you can measure. And the Common Data Service is the underpinning that allows you to consistently have all of your data modeled, and that we'll talk more about that, across your business. So all of your applications, first party, line of business, third party, they can all work against that same data set. Gartner's put out several reports across APAS and data integration where they talk about the future being about every application accessing the same data without having to understand where it comes from. That's really what we're trying to do here. Bring it all together so all your applications can act against that. So why the Common Data Service? We try to boil it down to 3 high-level promises or areas. The first is we are working to provide you a single focal point for all of your data. And we'll talk more about that in detail in a second. Once all your data is in one place, the tools offered by Common Data Service, as well as the broader Microsoft Business App Platform, make it easy to build applications on top of that, to deploy those applications and to manage those apps. And the last one is, it just works with the rest of Microsoft. Throughout this session here, we'll talk about examples of where building once on top of the Common Data Service automatically lights up all that information, all that data, all those processes with the rest of the Microsoft ecosystem, the productivity space, Office 365, the applications across Microsoft as well, like Power BI. These all just work if you build on top of the Common Data Service. And so we believe these to really be the core of what we want to provide you through the Common Data Service. Slightly different pivot. So why the Common Data Service? At the end of the day, there's a bunch of different roles out there, a bunch of different people trying to do different things. For our power users, right, the citizen developer, the people, the end users throughout your company and enterprises, the Common Data Service, together with Power Apps, Flow, and Power BI, provide a great extensibility and self-service model. I can just build Power Apps and Power BI reports. I can automate with Flow on top of that Common Data Service. For the IT admin or pro, it provides a management experience You set your security, for example, once in the common data service, and all of Microsoft's ecosystem will respect that. For the ISV app developers, well, there's a couple things here. First of all, we have a developer experience, and we'll talk about this in a moment. So build your apps here on the common data service against our common data model, and it doesn't matter to you where that data is coming from. We commoditize the movement and accessibility of data, whether it be from the Dynamics family of services or, and we'll talk about this more, perhaps even third-party services outside of Microsoft. So you build it once, and you don't have to worry about where that data is coming from. Your app can act on it the same way, regardless of source. And then for line of business developers, well, it's actually a fairly similar thing, right? You're able to build your application for your company directly on the same data that Microsoft's first-party applications are using, and even ISV apps you've acquired. So again, it's a simple build experience, accessing that same data across all of the applications in your company. Yes, I see a hand there. Oh, volume.
No.
I'm going to speak louder into this mic until we can get the IT guy. Okay. So, why the common data service? This is a bit of a build-up slide here that we like to use. So at the core of it all, and we'll talk more, oh, maybe not, we'll talk more about this, is our common data model. A set of entities that can represent everything that's interesting for your business application, your data. Now, the thing is, we ship with a bunch of these that come out of the box. You can also create your own. You can create what we call custom entities. You can shape that data model to your needs. Applications that you acquire will also apply the types of changes they need so they can work against that data model, be it a first-party Microsoft app or a third-party. And on top of all of that, going back to that IT Pro experience, is a security model that guarantees that your data is going to be safe. And we'll talk in detail about that in the coming slides here. We talked about that focal point for your data. The work happening literally right now as we speak, and we have actual sessions throughout the day in this very room about this, we are bringing all of your Dynamics data into the common data service right away in an integrated fashion. So you can act on that. You can build your applications directly over top the data you might have in Dynamics 365 for operations or sales or financials. Similarly, that same work and infrastructure we're doing lets you bring in data from third-party sources. So again, going back to that, your application doesn't have to know what the source of that data is. You worry about the shape of that data, and we provide that plumbing so you can populate that data in here. So you're no longer in the point-to-point business. Your app builds here centrally against the data model, and then we take care of the rest for you. Going back to the whole, great, it just works with the rest of Microsoft. We work with tons of partners across the company. By the way, is the volume okay still? You can hear okay? Okay, just want to check. With the rest of Microsoft to make sure those applications just know how to consume the data that lives in our common data service. An example of this, we'll touch on later, Power BI. The Power BI desktop tool knows how to implicitly talk to the common data service, bring up your data models so you can start building your reports right away. By modeling your data in the CDS, the Common Data Service, it just lights up in Power BI. And we're working with teams like the Microsoft Graph and the rest of Office so that data is tied in right across the board. They understand how to relate the information that you have in Office 365 with the business application data you have in the Common Data Service. That's just part of what we will deliver out of the box. I'm just going to click all the way through here. So, the last one, simplifying application development. Our goal is that every type of application maker and builder in the world can build in the common data service. Starting from a low-code, no-code approach, drag and drop, point and click. Using the Power Apps suite of the Power Apps service, those developers can create the apps and solutions they need on the common data service, just because, again, the data is already there. You can have very complex, high code. The folks that live in Visual Studio or are writing all types of JS-based web clients, they can go and build applications as well with the SDKs we're releasing. And guess what? There is a middle ground. You can enhance the power and extend the logic of Power Apps by using that same SDK and hosting that in something like Azure Functions. So you can do advanced queries, do advanced scenarios. So you're still using Power Apps for all the goodness of cross-plat, out-of-the-box, multimodal app development, but you can enhance that with that logic server side. So these are the approaches we're taking to make it easier to build applications. I'll hand it over to Clay.
Thank you. So what we're going to talk about in the next session is where we're at now. So this is functionality that is either in the public environments at the moment that you have access to, or is available through a preview program at the moment. Then what Jonas is going to finish on is what's in our roadmap and what's coming up soon. Before we get the question, we have an email address at the end that you can contact to get into any of the preview programs. The main one I'm going to talk about in this session is the Power BI integration. If you're interested, there'll be an email address that you can contact and get that functionality enabled for you. So first of all is around focal point for your data. So this was where Jono was talking about how we want to get all that data into the CDS and available so you've got one common model to develop against. And this is where the CDM comes in. And this is where I spend my time focusing on this model. The idea here is not that it is going to represent all of the data that you have in every single system that you have. It's trying to identify the common elements that are valuable in integration scenarios and in companion app development scenarios. So what you'll find is that we're developing a set of common entities that hopefully try and bridge the gap between Dynamics 365 for operations, for sales, for financials. We've done competitive research. We're looking at our graph, how Bing represents data, lots of different sources to come up with a common definition of an entity. So you will notice some terminology changes from the other products within Dynamics 365, but that's because we had to come up with a new common standard. At the moment, they're very much focused on people, organizations, groups, and really common data types that would sit within an ERP or a CRM system. We have pretty aggressive plans at the moment. We're sitting at about 70 entities at the moment. The plan is that we'll be at the 300, 400 mark by the end of next quarter. And that's specifically focused around the D365 operations for sales and operations parity. So lighting up those integration scenarios. We have another session, by the way, today. We've got the details at the end called Managing the Common Data Service, which is in this room a little bit later today. And it talks about that integration scenario and how we actually map it into the common data model. Now, as I said before, these aren't intended to capture all of your data. So for that reason, they're extensible. So if you in your environment go, well, I have these 5 bits of extra information that I need to define an account, you can add those into the fields. So the model that we produce is supposed to be the starting point and the base point for your applications and your data storage. It's by no means going to be the finished product. So our templates and our integration will leverage the CDM. You can go in and add fields. You can add entire new entities and relationships between those fields as well. So all that schema modeling that we can do, you can go out and add to as well. Now, the benefit of the CDM that we produce is a few little goodies come along with it. So we are not only producing the schema itself, we have a team working on the integration projects for operations and sales, so that that integration flow happens out of the box. We are working on the Power BI perspectives so that the common models light up within Power BI as well. And we also invest quite a lot in extra metadata that Power Apps and Flow needs to work properly. So for example, we tell Power Apps, these are the fields you'll want to look at when you're creating data. These are the fields you're going to want to look at in a report. These are the fields that you're going to want to look at in inquiry. So Power Apps actually uses that data when it's creating a new app for you, so you get off to a better starting point rather than having to drag and drop every single field. So we're trying to make the base entities as rich as we can so that they provide a great starting point. Now, the question that we get is, why would I use these? Why wouldn't I just go create the exact model that I want? And the idea here is, first of all, the integrations that we're building are going to populate these entities with data. So if you've got a customer that's deployed the standard CDS and they've got Dynamics 365 for operations and sales, it's the common entities that are going to be filled with data. So if you build an ISV application and you use all custom entities off to the side, that customer is then going to have to do data migration to move their data into the entities that you've built. If you've leveraged the common entities, the idea is that they can come into your application and they have a starting point with their data. They're not starting from scratch again and again. And as I said before, you get the benefits of things like Power BI and the integration. We have security roles and lots of fun stuff like that. The other little element in there is we have a concept pick list. People coming from the AX world, it's the new iteration of an enum, but it's the same thing. Standardized lists, we have a group that come out of the box, but you can go and extend these, add your own, all that sort of fun stuff. One of the other nice additions that we get with the CDS, and this is for any entity, common or custom, is we have an Excel add-in. So this got published to the store on Thursday or Friday, something like that. You had to go manually download the manifest and install it. It finally got through the Office Store release process last week, so you can go in and find it now. But basically, very similar if people are used to the D365 for Operations Excel add-in. This allows you to work with any entity within the CDS, pull data out, work with it live, post new data. You get the benefit of our label translations. You can get the benefit of our validation and actually work with it directly in Excel rather than an offline integration. Security. This is going to be the briefest overview of security you're ever going to get. But we have a session this afternoon at 2 o'clock that's going to go into this in a lot more detail. Now, at the moment, our security is simple. It's an object level or an entity level security. So we sort of have two sides of it. On the right-hand side, yes, on your right-hand side is more the administrator type roles. So this is if you're a creator of a database or you're an app maker or administrator, you get access to large sets of data, you can administrator, create entities, and do far more administrative functions. On the left-hand side, you then have people that can build and work with apps and people that can just consume apps. So the security that we've applied to the sides on the left is entity level permissions. So you can say for a particular entity, they can have read access, create access, update, delete. You can group that into roles and then apply roles to users. What Jono's going to talk about very soon is that we're introducing in the very near future row level security as well. Which is obviously what we see as the complete security picture, but it's not in there at the moment. At the moment, it's object level. The other option you'll get, by the way, is the first point there, is that databases are open. If you've used, how many people have used CDS? Sorry, I think we forgot to ask that. Oh, that's pretty impressive, actually. When you do go in the first time and create a database, it asks you if you want to be restricted or open. Basically, restricted gives you these options of giving people different rows. If you just say open, every single person in your organization has full access to the database. So that's going to be the first decision you're ever going to make. Okay, so let's jump in and have a quick look at the portal. All right. So web.powerapps.com is going to bring you here. Right now, the CDS, although we're going to talk about in the future how you can build ISV apps and use the SDK, at the moment, our primary entry point is through Power Apps, and that's why we're available in the Power Apps portal. Ignore the URL that you can see in my window where it says preview.web.powerapps.com. That's just because I'm a Microsoft employee. For the rest of you, you want to go to web.powerapps.com, okay? Now, this is showing me everything related to these environments. So I'm seeing apps, I'm seeing my flows, connections to gateways, and you can see down here I've got the common data service where I see my entities and I see my pick lists. Now, jumping into the entities, without doing anything, I have the set of standard common data model entities that I was talking about before. So these get deployed with every single instance of CDS, and we make updates and improve this as well. So we're at the moment, have a shipping cadence of about every 2 weeks, sorry. So we have updates coming into the environment with new entities, additional fields, but we're making sure there's no breaking changes coming through with that. So nothing's being removed, nothing's being deprecated. It's purely additive changes that get introduced every 2 weeks. With each of these entities, you can come in, start seeing the types of fields and information that we have associated with it. As you'll notice, looking at something like an account, it's very generic information, as I said before. It's the common information that you would want to capture, contact information, what grouping they have, and things like that. Now, I can come in here if I want, and let's say, well, I really need this one bit of extra information in my environment. I can say I want to add a field, call it tech conference.
Can you zoom in?
Oh, sorry. Can't hear us, can't see us. Is that better?
Yes.
Yes? Apologies. Can I change the contrast? Oh,
I don't know.
no. No, but I can, basically what we're seeing here is a list of fields, if you can't see it in the gray here. The first column is the display name, the second is the system name, and then the third is actually the data type. Hopefully you can see the one I'm actually entering, as it's in the darker colors. And you can see the list of types. So I'm just going to add a really basic text field, go text, and click Save Entity. I can put in things like max length, default fields. We're working on the ability to add in logic and calculations and fun stuff like that. But what this does is by adding in this one field here, it's available now to me in Power BI, Power Apps, Flow, all the different applications, the SDK that would be communicating with this service. If I was an ISV developer, I could be building this as part of my package that was going to go along with my application as well. Okay, one other thing I just want to show you very quickly is the admin portal. So now this is, if you're new to CDS, environment is going to be a new concept for you. An environment basically is our overarching sort of premise within your tenant. So you can have multiple organizations if you can get on the internet. Oh. Apparently all I had to do was mock it, and it tried. Okay, we'll give that a second while I continue to talk. The environment sits at the higher level. So an environment contains not only your data schema and data related to CDS, it can also hold Power Apps, flows, connection into information, and gateways. So the idea there is that you can operate and have a test environment as well as a production environment. You can also go down the path of if your HR department wanted to hold highly sensitive information and apps and they really wanted to segregate it from the rest of the business, they could have their own environment sitting under there as well. I'm not going to go to the admin portal, it seems. And hopefully by the time of my next demo, my internet connection is functioning again.
But trust us, there is an admin portal.
There is an admin portal.
And you can do that.
Yes, we're extremely trustworthy.
Can't you tell?
You're not supposed to laugh at that. The next one here is simple app creation. So while we've got lots of different avenues for you to create apps, our goal is that the way that we build the CDS service and the way that we make it available to you simplifies the process of app creation, however you're doing it. Now, at the moment, the way we work is through Power Apps. So lots of you raised your hand before and said you've worked with Power Apps. So our goal here is that we're an absolute first-class data source within Power Apps. So we work with their team a lot. We sit in the same building, and we spend a lot of time making sure that CDS works as well as it possibly can. And this is things I was talking about, like having the field groups and the definitions of what CDS should put on a form to make it as rich as possible. One of the really, really nice things that we do is app from data is what we call it. We don't have a really good name for it. But the idea is that you could go into CDS, say, I want to create a new app and I want it based off this particular entity. And what it'll do is it will go create you view forms, list forms, and edit forms, basically directly off that entity that you can use as a starting point to start building your application. So for a really simple data collection app, you can basically spin up those 3 forms based off the metadata that comes from the CDS. The last part there, which is really, really handy, is the translations. So everything within the Common Data Service has translations available for it at the moment on our out-of-the-box entities and on all the pick lists. We have translations into, I never remember the number, but it's somewhere between 48 and 52 different languages. It's in a similar way if people are familiar with DEV23 for operations. Basically, you have an ID version of the name, which is that concatenated name you saw before, and then you can go in and store translations. So for everything out of the box, all the common entities that we ship and all our lists of pick lists, we have all the translations available. If you go in and add custom artifacts to your environment, create your own entity, create your own pick lists, you can create translations as well. And Power Apps will respect all those for you. So if a user opens up your app in a different language on their phone, they'll see the translated version of all the field names, of all the drop-down values and everything along those lines. So that's value that we add in that we can't do with other data sources in Power Apps that's supported by the Common Data Service. I'm going to talk about the examples if you haven't played with Power Apps before. The Power Apps that are mobile apps at the moment, they run in a phone view or a tablet view. You can access them through a web browser as well, but they render in these types of formats. These are a few examples of ones that we build internally as we're testing things out in the CDS. But what we also have, and the one on the right is an example of this, is templates that you can use for app creation or learning a little bit more about the Common Data Service. So, again, now hopefully I'm functioning. Or maybe not.
Everyone disconnect their laptops from the wireless right now.
Let me just... Apologies, everyone. Give me 1 minute. I'm going to very technically just try and disconnect and reconnect. And let's see if that worked. Whoop. Come on. Come on.
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Right.
Okay. So I'm going to show you two things first. The first is that app from data scenario I was talking about. They're easy to create. The second one is that I'm going to show you one of the templates. So you have two different ways of creating a Power App. First of all, same thing, web.powerapps.com. Come down here to New App, and you'll see that it always gives you a choice. Power Apps for Windows or Power Apps for Web. We'll do the first one in the web, we'll do the second one in Windows. The web one basically is an entirely web-based application. You don't need to download anything. You can run it on a Mac or whatever operating system you happen to be using. But this is actually building the Power App itself. So you'll notice the first list that's going to load up the top here is going to be the different data sources that we have available to work with. And the first one is going to be the Common Data Service. And I'm going to say I want to create a phone layout. And you'll notice what it's going to do. It knows that I have a CDS instance deployed, and it's going to bring back all the entities that I have available. Now, whether these be standard, custom, whatever they happen to be, I'm going to click Account and click Connect. So what this is going to do is it's going to go create a new application in Power Apps. It's going to create 3 forms, one for a list, one for a view, and one for an edit. It's going to link, it's going to write all the little logic in the background on how to post and how to do the updates. You can then come into it and just start using it. We've made sure that the create form will have all the mandatory fields and that nice type of stuff on it. Or you can go through and edit it. You can reformat it, you can add fields to it, you can remove field from it, or really do what you want. The Power Apps team are working on, right now we do this with one entity. They're working on adding support for multiple entities into this as well. So you can go in and pick a list of 5, 10, 15 entities, and it will go and build an app with all the different forms for all those different entities for you as well. And the web is still killing me, isn't it? And it's gonna, yep, okay. I'm gonna give it 5 more seconds as I say this sentence very slowly before I move on, and it's gonna work. No, it's not. Okay. So it would be making 3 separate forms, one with list, one with edit, one with view. And the point that we were going to show you there is that you can actually jump into the app, go straight into preview mode, and start creating data because of that metadata that we've passed through. So what I'm going to do in a potentially really naive attempt to get something else to work, I'll go into Power Apps Desktop now, and we'll see if we can create the template. If that doesn't work, I apologize in advance, and we'll jump back to PowerPoint and start wasting everyone's time, but we'll give it one more whirl. So you'll notice the one difference here is now that I'm in desktop, this little option down here for app templates is available. Okay. Let's see how this looks. Better? Yes? Thank you. So you'll notice you get the app templates displaying down the bottom here. Now the difference is that the app templates are only available at the moment in desktop. You won't see them through web, but this is a feature that's likely to be released in the next month. So it's only the main difference that you would have to go to desktop at the moment. So these are all different Power Apps templates. They are not all CDS, but the Alumni Association, case management, invoice management, quick tips are all CDS-related templates. Now, what these actually allow you to do, if you say use, they're going to go connect to your CDS environment, pull through your data, and it gives you a basic example of an app that we've built of how you could leverage the case management entities. Now, these, it's my team that I work with to actually build these apps. These aren't intended as production ready. You would go use this to run a complex case management business or group within your company. The idea here is that it gives you an example of how you can work with the entities in different ways and how you can leverage them within an application. We have also 2 tablet templates available, a case management version of the within template. Hey, it actually worked. Go Power Apps. So the numbers here, it's actually showing you pulled coming through directly from CDS. So it's gone through, we've got an all cases screen, we've got one to create new. You can see it's pulling through my data because you can see all the tests that I've run by putting in rubbish data. But what I can do is I can come in here, go straight into preview mode, and I can create a new case. I can look at my active cases, and I can actually start leveraging this as a real app if I wanted to. And this is something that we've built in completely in Power Apps. There's nothing fancy or Microsoft demo magic behind this. And you can go through the Power App and see the code that we've written, the images that we've used, and how we've actually built this. So this is what we recommend people at the moment. If you want to look at a nice example of how Power Apps can work with the CDS, these templates are a great example. What we're going to continue to use them for is as we introduce new functionality into the CDS, like image support or anything else that we might be adding in the near future, we'll go through and reiterate on these apps or add new apps to show off those new features as well. So that we continue to use it as basically a way to teach you how to understand leveraging the entities within Power Apps. As I said before, what it is actually doing in the background, I'm going to show you one small example here. If I jump back here, is no, because it's thinking again, so I'm not going to show you. Okay, let me jump back into PowerPoint for a second. That's going to work for me, at least I know. It just works. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's... So obviously this one we're referring to is it just works with the Microsoft ecosystem. So what we're driving for here is that we really want that once you've put that data into CDS, you can work with it in Excel, Power BI, Flow, Power Apps, all these different Microsoft. This is where we spend a lot of our time at the moment, as Jono said. A large percentage of our time is working with partner teams across the Microsoft ecosystem to make sure that they can access our data extremely easily and vice versa, we can present their data within the common data service. The first one, which is the one that's in preview at the moment, which is very interesting, is Power BI integration. So what we've built, and as I said, there's a link at the end as to how to get in this, but you can use direct query through Power BI to connect directly into the common data service. So you can create custom perspectives. A perspective is a group of entities that you want to visualize within your reporting model. These are created in the portal the same way I showed you before. And basically in the background, we do the work to create a tabular model with the necessary queries. You can log then into Power BI Desktop, and there is actually a new connection there just for the common data service that you can use and log directly in. Our security is enforced and all that sort of fun stuff. As I mentioned before, for all the common or the standard entities that we build, we're also building all the perspectives for them as well. So any of those common entities that are already there, there's already a related perspective. But what's coming with this part of this preview as well is then the ability for ISVs and customers, you can go and create your own perspectives that sit on top of custom entities or potentially presenting our entities in a different way. Outlook add-in, they're coming out in a couple of iterations. The first one that we have out in at the moment, it's available from the admin portal. You can download it and install it. It should be in the store. It is in the store as well. And basically what this allows you to do is work with the contacts that are stored within CDS. So you can move contacts from Outlook up into the CDS. Also, if you receive email from someone, you can identify whether they're a contact within CDS, and if they're not, create them quickly. Where we're going with this, and this is a scenario we're spending a lot of time on, is, and we have prototypes for it, is actually then showing all the related information within CDS. So when you receive an email from a particular contact, basically what the Outlook add-in is going to do is going to go and show you, well, they have related cases, they have sales orders, there is an open account for them, and even across your custom entities. This is something we're working on at the moment. The first iteration of it is out, but it's an area in that it just works themes that we're spending a lot of time. Flow, for anyone that hasn't used Flow before, it's kind of like if this, then that, but the enterprise version that we have available within Microsoft. It has a connector directly through CDS, so you can monitor for changes in entities. You can create and publish back information as well. We have a basic version of it at the moment, but again, it's an area that we're adding more capabilities to, so it can do more advanced things with CDS. Now, the It Just Works demo. This is going to be the really ironic one. So let's see how this goes. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you Power BI. So hopefully I'm solid. So let me just open up a new window in Power BI, and I'm going to show you how to go through and connect. So this at the moment, it's available in the current version of Power BI Desktop. You'll actually see the connector. But what's going to happen is when you try and log into it, it's going to say that you don't have perspectives enabled for your common data service. So you do need to connect with us to get that preview enabled for you, and that's going to be the information at the end. So under Get Data, I'm going to go to Online Services, and you can see the common data service is there in beta. Click Connect. I've connected before, so it's already going to have my credentials. It's not going to ask me to log in, otherwise an AAD prompt would box up. And now it's going to ask you to select an environment. So I'm going to go to Clay's environment, and it's going to go through and connect. It'll only show environments that you've been given access to, whether they're yours or someone else's. As you can see, we have quite a few going internally. But once it's connected, it's then going to bring back all the perspectives that are available within your environment. So these can be both a mix of your standard and custom. So I can come through here and say, I want to do a report on purchase orders. It'll give me information about what's in that environment, or sorry, what's in that perspective. It'll say it includes these different dimensions and measures, and I can click OK. It'll go through, establish a direct query, so there is no sync. There isn't OData in the background moving data back and forth. This is a direct query straight against your CDS database sitting in the background. And so what I can do here is this was referred to in our last demo as the worst Power BI demo ever done. But you can come in here, and just like you can do with Power BI, I can grab, okay, I want my total amount. I want to break it down by status, just as you would with any other data source. And that information is coming through live. Your security is being applied. And I can even pull through address information, and it has the context of that. So I can say, put it by state and map it out by country. And I can see it in North America. Okay, so we're passing through that metadata. Security is applied at an object level at the moment, but as I said, we're investing in RLS at the moment. So even my RLS security. So as we go back to that point of It Just Works, our goal is that whether it's security, whether it's calculations, whether it's logic, regardless of the Microsoft application that you're actually connecting to the common data service in, we're going to make sure that that logic and those rules are respected across those different applications. Okay, so now we get to move into the funner stuff.
And incidentally, demo free, so it'll be straight through. Okay, so first of all, I just want to call out, you'll see at the very end, there is an email address we'll put up. A bunch of what we'll talk about in the next 20 minutes or so, we are entering preview this week, this month. So where interested, we really want to engage with the folks in this room, whether it be to get you into the preview program, to talk about your problems, patterns that you want to you want to engage with. So please do reach out. The more contact we have, the better off we are. So this is really a request and a call to action on your part. Engage with us. Reach out. Talk with us about what you're about to see or what might be missing from your point of view. Okay, so kind of moving through those 3 promises again, a focal point for your data. One of the biggest investments we've been making over the past 2 months, well, actually more than 2 months, last little bit, is data integration. So it's a staged approach that we're following, but basically our goal is to provide a unified view across all of your Dynamics 365 data through the Common Data Service. We talked a bit about the Common Data Model, right? That data model is at the core of all of this. We know what your data and sales looks like. We know what your data and operations looks like. We will stitch that together for you. You don't have to do that work for those out-of-the-box and standard sort of objects and entities. Obviously, if you've done extensions, you'll need to map those in as appropriate, but that's the affordance that we're building here. You can create that customization. So we're going to tie together your Dynamics 365 data so everything can have a unified view. What we're starting with, though, is actually the preview program we're talking about. That launches this week. It's about prospect to cash. From a lead in the from the sales domain across to the operations for fulfillment of orders, and then that information of invoice being paid and whatnot back into your sales system. So we're lighting up scenarios to start because we want to do the right mapping. We want to understand what the data model needs to look like. You, from a customer's point of view, you don't have to do a lot. You enable that template. That's what we're thinking of. And for all of these scenarios, there will be templates. And for those scenarios that we can't cover because it's your customizations, you'll be able to go in and make those mappings yourself. Again, the goal here being that all of your Dynamics 365 data can be stitched together. That next turn of the crank, well, guess what? There's hundreds of millions of users' data inside of Office 365. We think business apps get even more powerful by tying together your business data with that productivity space. And that's what we're working to light up right now. We've been spending inordinate amounts of time at the whiteboard making sure we do the right thing. We're working with the Office team, the Microsoft Graph team. We will provide that, again, integrated view of your business data with the appropriate productivity. And so you're going to see over the next while us roll these things out as well. And then, obviously, third-party data is important. Not everyone's using a Microsoft service. We recognize that. That's the reality. And so this infrastructure is also going to allow us to bring in data from where your business data resides. Again, into that data model, right? The point here being that data model is consistent for regardless of which services you're using. Your applications just work against that data model, and we're plumbing that data flow into the appropriate parts. Quick deeper dive into this. So I'll just show the picture too. So what we're focusing on, like I said, we're launching the preview this week, is what we're calling prospect to cash. Just at a really high level, this diagram is intended to show there's a business process. In this case, it goes from left to right, where it starts from a lead, goes through to the order, the invoice, and then back into knowing that that thing had been paid. We're facilitating that life cycle, that business process, and flowing the data back and forth between sales and operations. We're working on a variety of these scenarios, order invoices, flows, and all of those. Those are all parts of what we want to do and light up in the next several months here. One of the main things, we will respect security, your security decisions, where they've been made. That's a key part. We can't be a source of data leakage. So we'll work to move the data back and forth as appropriate between the systems. And on top of that, we'll make sure we're doing the right thing for security. And this idea of mappings, of templates, like I said before, we'll ship a bunch of these out of the box. You'll see more and more of these light up in our portal, but you can also create your own or map in from first or third party. And so you'll see those pop. Clay's alluded to business logic. So we have rudimentary business logic right now. There's default value on text. There's a couple min-max. We're building that out, working with the Power Apps team to make sure that if you're writing some expression already in the Power Apps client, you're not having to write it a different way for the Common Data Service. We want to make it as simple as possible for you to transition across the business application platform ecosystem. So we're adding support for that. We will provide what we like to call sort of a middle tier, meaning we evaluate it for you. If you're using Power Apps, you shouldn't have to go and deploy some external service or server to do these evaluations. So for those scenarios, you define it on the data model, and we'll evaluate that for you. We'll start with simple. UI to drag and drop and create that expression and go all the way up through the ranks of additional complexity and eventually expose a full-on expression language editor. And really, this is just kind of that build-up, right? It's a staged rollout of the functionality and features. And the key part of what we want to do here is we want to allow you to define complex queries, joins across multiple different places to solve your business problem. And so that type of advanced logic will be supported through a mix of our SDK and then some of the business logic constructs that we'll ship here. Security. Clay mentioned this, and so we are entering preview at the end of this month of RLS. RLS can be record, row, or role level security. The truth is, it is all of these. We are a role-based security model, so it's RLS from that point of view. It is also giving you the ability to define policies to specify which records or rows users will see. And so we're starting with pick list. So pick list, as Clay mentioned, equal enums, right, from operations. And so you could say, for example, members of role presenting in Tahoma 3 can see records where the field 1 equal foo. No, I don't know. I made that up on the spot. But basically,
that
pick
was
list values. You could tell, right?
Yeah.
Anyhow, we'll expand that over time. So the meaningful ones are around principles, right? Around users, around groups, around business hierarchies. Those are the features that we're rolling in, in quick succession. The key takeaway here is, as Clay mentioned, we code on 2-week sprints, and we ship on the tail of those. So these are quick iterations. A lot of the foundational pieces are what we're lighting up now. We want to validate that experience with the previews, and then you will see, month over month, the new functionality coming. So we recognize row, record, role, level security, all of the above are critical for enterprise security, for us to be a trustworthy platform for you, and those are the investments we're making right now. And the last bullet point here, again, going back to that diagram right at the beginning, the common data service sits underneath the Power Apps, the Flow, the Power BIs of the world. And so what we are doing is we're providing consistent security. So when Power Apps comes in, it's evaluated for that user context. The same user context and therefore same evaluation as when you come in via Power BI or come in via Flow. And we'll talk about the ISV story in a second. It's consistent for that too. And that's one of the benefits we believe for the IT Pro here, right? I define this once, and now my first-party LOB apps, Microsoft apps, ISV-built apps, and the power users' extensibility, right? The self-service ones they built themselves, they're all respecting the same security across all of your data. All right, app creation. I don't want to steal too much thunder on this. I will simply say, I think later today in this exact room, we do have building apps and developing with the Common Data Service. Sorry, Roberto, if you're in the back of the room. We are entering preview with an SDK this month. And so call to action, if this is interesting for you, the email address at the end, contact us. We want to fill up this program and get those patterns understood, have those interactions. So please, please reach out. The SDK, this is your pro dev story, right? Building applications on top of the CDS. It is the same SDK, and this is worth calling out. It is the same SDK that our first-party Microsoft apps are using. That's one of our design principles here. No more first, third-party, internal, external. We are consistent so that you can do the same thing that our internal applications can do. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, the SDK could absolutely be used for a build atop the CDS experience. You have a web app or something, you want to build that on top of the CDS, that's great. It can also be used to enhance Power Apps logic. So for folks that have been playing with Power Apps, has anyone used the custom APIs before, where you can connect to a hosted API? That's a way for you to build advanced business logic to power the Power Apps. So it doesn't have to be that you build a custom front end. You can enhance the expressiveness and the capabilities of a Power App with this SDK. This SDK is on the CDS, and so you can do whatever you want with that. All right. And Clay also mentioned this a couple times. One of the things that we're doing with the Common Data Service is at the core of it is the data model. It is the entities that you'll find interesting and the relationships between those entities. One of the major investment areas between us and the Power Apps team, we work very closely together on this, is lighting up what we're calling entity forms. In the same way the app from data, the click experience that had the 3 screens automatically created, we're making that even easier. We're making it better. Based off of the metadata on entities, you're going to have significantly more complex applications. I like to call it the 70% solution, right? You've got the navigational properties, the relationship between the entities, driving how that application was created. And then you take that last 30%, the last inch of the mile, and you can customize and do whatever you want in there. But the idea, again, being we make it as simple as possible for those internal users who want to create a task-based app, something simple. They're not wanting to spend a lot of time building a fancy app. They're not an ISV. I need to solve a problem in my enterprise against data that's already there. And the Power Apps Entity Forms experience is a big part of that. And you will see, I believe, a blog post very, very soon about the details around this, the first rollout. And so keep your eyes peeled on the Power Apps blog for that. The Power Apps client is where this surfaces. So that's why it's the Power Apps blog. All right, and then in the It Just Works, I've already alluded to this before, but I just want to reiterate. We are working to make all of Microsoft's data available and accessible for your applications built on the Common Data Service. We think it's a very compelling and strategic benefit for us to be able to provide you that, and you don't have to stitch it together yourself. We should be able to build business applications and processes that need some form of an interview between an employee and their manager. And you shouldn't have to go over to the Office side to figure out those APIs and how that all ties in and manage that all. We want to make it drop dead simple for you to focus on your app, your business process, and have that automatically light up over in the Office world and the productivity world. These are some of the key investments we're lining up, again, as we literally speak, to deliver on over the coming months. And so is a big part of what we believe to be the value prop of what the Common Data Service is doing, bringing together your business data and then marrying that, joining that, relating that with your productivity data so you don't have to worry about it. A single entry point for all of your data across Microsoft. And then finally, Power BI integration. So you saw a little bit of sort of what's in preview today. Clay mentioned it's the standard entities, so the ones that come out of the box, that show up in Power BI. Well, one of the things we mentioned was the data model here. That you're investing in that. You're making it right for your company, for your applications. That same data model should just show up, right? It should just light up in Power BI. So if you extend or create, your own custom entities, or perhaps a grouping of those entities, your application is solving a particular problem, you should probably surface those entities as a group in Power BI.
And this is actually where our release cycle burns us when prepping decks. When we wrote this deck, this wasn't in preview yet. It was still on the roadmap. It's in preview now. So the Power Apps preview not only includes standard perspectives, but also custom.
Absolutely. And this goes back to, if you're building an application, you want to be able to create these, package them with your app, deploy it, and the rest of Microsoft just knows how to work against that. This is delivering on that promise. It just works with the other applications across the company. All right, so I'm not going to dwell too much on the next slide, although I'm sure everyone wants me to. Let's just do this. 3 big takeaways, call to actions for folks in this room.
First all the cameras go up.
Yeah, exactly. We are, as I mentioned, entering preview with security of RLS this month, actually, in the coming weeks. If you're interested in that, email address coming up later. So security is 1. Data integration. Prospect to cache is the first scenario we're lighting up. If that connectivity of data and the single view across your sales and operations data is interesting, that's the second program, super interesting. 3rd, CDS SDK. This is how you can build your ProDev applications on top of the CDS. That's the 3rd program that's entering preview end of this month. All 3 of those, take that away from here. The second quarter, so basically now through June, we'll continue to make investments across those same areas. Clay's working on introducing a ton more of the data model that's interesting. The entities for sales, operations, financials, and also integration with perhaps even your productivity suite. Who knows? And then the other part is, I want to call it, we'll continue to make advancements in our Power Apps entity forms. So that point and click, the 70% app solution, we'll continue to make that experience even smarter. So you get further along in your app creation with even less work. So those are some major areas of investment for us, among a lot of the other things. This wouldn't be a conference session without talk about pricing and licenses. So the way to think about the Common Data Service for now is the following. There's create rights and there's use rights. That's literally it. You got to create a database to use a database. The way that you get create rights is by purchasing a Power Apps P2 license. If you go to powerapps.com, you'll see all the different plans. You need the P2, at least one P2 license to create the databases. When you create it, you're then an administrator on that, and you can add folks that have a P1 license. P1 is the consume. So that's kind of the path forward. We are actively working on the correct plans and licenses for an ISV program, because as an ISV, you're not interested necessarily in per-user licensing and coverage, right? You're thinking more along the lines of resource, capacity, PaaS-type approaches, and so we're working on that. But for right now, P2 is the way to get the ability to create a database. P1 or P2 gets the ability to access a database. And then you get 2 databases per P2 license. I'm going to skip over the next slide because there's so many boxes, and I'd rather take some questions. This slide here is on the web as well. If you search for Power Apps, licensing, pricing, any of those things, you'll get to this picture. And because it's constantly evolving, I don't want to dwell on it. Same takeaway as before. You need a P2 to create the database. You need a P1 or a P2 to have the ability to access the database. That's literally the gist of it for now.
It will be in the deck that you can download, and down the bottom is the link to the most current version.
And that will always be up to date. Oh. So the question was, is anything included with the Dynamics 365 plans? So as of right now, my understanding is create rights are not included with Dynamics 365. So that's why the P2 plans are necessary to create the database. I don't even think use at this point is. We're evolving that story because it has to get simpler and easier. But as of right now, the statement I believe is it's a P2 Power Apps license required to create. There's a hand there as well. Oh, yes. So the question was, is the CDS then going to be the preferred way to keep sales and operations in sync? So as we progress along our path of doing this type of integration, that is definitely one of the things that we expect to be able to do, is provide the holistic view centrally of the world. The thing I want to call out, just total openness, is this is a staged approach. You know, where we are, we're introducing the functionality. We are not, just to be sort of put a point on it, we're not providing full up master data management. That's not a scenario yet. We're very much saying, let's bring together data from both sides so that business processes and applications can extend that. That's where we're starting. So that's why, just to answer the question, you know, the capability eventually we expect to get there. For right now, it is, let's bring that data together, provide that extensibility for our end users, enable ISVs to build apps on top of that, or line of business applications. This is that email address we promised.
And then we'll do questions.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We'll be left plenty of time for questions here. So this is the email address. It just got recreated today, so if it does bounce your email, our names are at the front of the deck. And so for me, it's first initial, last name, and I think our profiles also have it. Yep. So again, we really want to hear from you, get you guys involved in the preview program, get on the phone and talk with you about what your customer patterns, problems are. That's how we get better at this. So please do reach out if you're interested, or questions.
Yeah. We have some related sessions that will be interesting. So this afternoon, there is managing the common data service. So this is going to focus on integration and security and the administration portal. So more on what an administrator would have to do in that world, but it does give you some more detail on how integration is going to work and how security is going to work as well, as long as some great demos. There's a repeat of that session tomorrow as well. And on Wednesday, we have an Ask the Experts, so the group building the D365 and CDS, sorry, the Dynamics 365 and CDS integration is going to have a Q&A panel. And then the last one, while the description is a little bit confusing, selling and shipping a united Dynamics 365, that's the prospect to cash integration session. So the team that built the Dynamics 365 for ops and sales CDS prospect to quote full end-to-end integration, that's their session. So they're going to step through that point by point so you can understand what was involved and how it's going to work. So that's definitely an interesting session if you're interested in the D365 integrations. And now we have time for questions.
Yeah, I apologize. I don't know that there's mics.
There's not. I think we're just going to have to yell and repeat.
Yeah, just hands maybe, and then if you could stand up and we'll try and repeat the question as well.
Yeah. Will CDS work with local business data deployment option? So it will work in a sense that we will look at having integration options to bring data into the CDS, but not having the CDS sitting locally, if that's your question. Is it bringing local data into the CDS, or is it putting the CDS local? Okay,
Yeah.
it will be the former. It
Yeah.
will be, at the moment, we're looking at the cloud services like D365 for operations and sales, both online versions. But we are looking at on-premise options as well being brought into the CDS. But they would be brought into a cloud instance of CDS.
And that's the key part, just to kind of put this out there. The Common Data Service is a cloud service hosted in Azure. If you remember that very first slide, that's why Azure was kind of at the very bottom there. We don't work in Azure Stack, for example, so there isn't an on-premises only deployment of Common Data Service. We are a cloud-hosted service. We can bring data in from an on-premises environment, but that comes into the cloud in that case. Yes.
What with high load of data, mass data and mass changes in data?
So the question was, how do we handle sort of high load volume transactional data? So the way that the Common Data Service works right now is we basically have different capacities for what you purchase. And so from our point of view, it is sort of an operational SLA around the storage capacity. And then we are working to, as we introduce data integration or ISV, type approaches, to provide those guarantees of sort of aggregate operations as well as concurrent. So that's what you'll see as we grow the offering, is those guarantees, and then you can mix and match, right, what the requirements are for your business. I'm gonna take one from the back of the room because there's a hand there, the gentleman in the sweater. So the question was, with the hybrid Dynamics 365 approach kind of coming online, how does that work with the Common Data Service? I'll go back to actually the statement I made just a little bit ago. The Common Data Service, if you were to draw a topology diagram, is a box hosted in the cloud. We would view the Dynamics 365 hybrid deployments as a data source to bring data in from, or if you're synchronizing, push data back out to. But it is still sort of a separate box. And so whatever topology you have for the hybrid, we would pull into the Common Data Service, the Common Data Service itself still being hosted in the cloud. Does that make sense? So even though you're hybrid with some footprint on premises and in the cloud for the hybrid scenario, the Common Data Service is still wholly cloud. So you'd have a line pulling or pushing from that into the Common Data Service. Yes?
You said you're going to respect the security within operations and from other applications. How are you going to bring it together? Because today, operation is really complex, and sometimes even the implementer doesn't even know what is the correct security model, or it's very difficult to find it, understanding it entirety. How are you going to simplify it or make it visible that you really actually respecting the security of the data?
Sure. So the question was, how are we going to respect data between multiple systems within CDS? So two-part answer to that. One, come to the Managing CDS session at 2 o'clock, because our security PM is going to talk about it in more detail. The second part is it's by no means solved yet. It's ongoing work that's happening at the moment. But basically our goal is it's still going to have master data challenges. We can't just pull in sales and operations security and slam it all into one big mess in the middle. There would be like a management aspect to it that would need an administrator. But our goal is that to have processes that can support that management of bringing it in from either saying AX is the master or CX or CRM, sorry, and it's a combination of both. And then allowing that those security artifacts to be integrated back to AX and CRM between the two. So it's by no means solved yet. That's why it's on our roadmap of this is where we want to be with it. But a lot of work is going to go into it.
The one thing I do want to call out, you phrased it a particular way. Our goal is to respect the security of the source. right? And so you could have any type of configuration in any of those sources, and we'll respect. It felt like you were also asking, will we help you to rationalize and manage and understand what that security is? But that wasn't in scope, right? Because I would say that's a different problem that we're not tackling. Respecting the security of the source is our goal. That way we're not providing data leakage and other avenues, right, of getting, bypassing security.
For doing that, you have to have really much better discovery mechanism regarding
Yes.
how to do the security.
Yes.
You don't have it today.
Right. Yes, absolutely. There was a question down front.
Yeah, some of the services which we talked, you said those are out-of-the-box services. For example, order creation or sales order creation or purchase order. Are these already exposed out of the box, or we have to build a custom service and then expose them?
So the question is, are the out-of-the-box services for like sales order already available? So it's not that the services are available, it's that the data schema or the entity is available. So we have the schema for a sales order available today within the model, but it's then for your app to sit on top of that and actually leverage that schema. And what's going to happen with the data integration project is they will be populating that model with data from D365, either for operations or from sales. But if you wanted then to say, okay, I want to go build a sales order app, that's not something that the CDS provides, like all the business logic associated with that. You would then go leverage the common data service to go build your app on top of. The CDM is the schema or the definition of data that sits underneath it.
Basically, we have to build it and then expose it for third-party applications.
Yes. Okay.
So with the, I see there was a field type for the entities.
Mhm.
How does that tie into the extended data types that we are used to? And for translations, are we still doing translations on the metadata or the data as well, like product descriptions?
So the question is twofold. One, how do the data types within CDS relate to the extended data types within, I assume, operations? Yep. And then the second part was, do translations only relate to metadata or do they relate to data itself? So for the first one, the data types that we have within CDS are far more primal than the EDTs. So they're not going to be the list of however many hundreds we have within AX of the EDTs. They are basic. We have like image, text, pick list, address, things like that. There are some complex data types like quantity, which has an integer and a unit of measure, currency, which has an amount and a currency code, and address, which has 7 parts within it, name has like 4 parts in it. But apart from that, we are trying to keep it simpler. So you will have many EDTs mapped to one CDS data type. Okay? For the second part of your question, at the moment, our translation is focused on metadata, not data. So again, similar to AX, pick list values, field names, entity names, anything that's structured has a translation option. We don't have the ability yet to translate individual values. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yes, you. Mm-hmm. So the question was, if your business logic within CDS, can you leverage the business logic from the source system? I'd probably want to pull in some of the SDKs. I assume it's very possible at the moment to do that manually with the SDK. I'm not sure if we have any aspirations to have that as an automated, like you're on the sales order entity and I want to say use the operations business logic. It would be something you would have to call directly from the app that you built on top of the CDS.
Right, I'll tack on to that. That is definitely not kind of a round one thing for us to say this entity defer to this particular set of business logic in an external system. What we are introducing over time is more and more complex patterns of how we integrate that data in. So you could imagine eventually there is a create flow that might result in being calling that external system, which would trigger the appropriate business logic. That's not kind of in our first round though of that data integration yet.
Well, good. The gentleman in the back, red shirt. That's you.
Given this is a cloud-based solution, and it talks about security, how does this integrate with a solution in a government cloud?
That's a great question. So the question here is, how does this work with government clouds, sovereign clouds? So there's basically two parts to the answer there. CDS, Common Data Service, is a Microsoft cloud-hosted service, and although we are not right now in the sovereign clouds across the various countries, we are working towards that. So we will be offered in those clouds, including the U.S. government clouds. That's something that is on our roadmap. It's just a matter of getting those deployed. The second part is once you're there, it would operate with the same constructs and sort of constraints that the government cloud already has, right? Data stays resident in there, the same Azure Active Directory backend within that instance. So it's on our roadmap to get there. It's not a this quarter sort of a thing, but we absolutely expect to light those up, as well as in countries that have a variety of other data requirements. Our website does have at the Trust Center sort of all the declarations of the compliance certificates, the data residency and traffic sort of compliance. And so just keep your eyes peeled on that. But it is a goal for us to be in sovereign clouds and government cloud. We're working through those right now, so that's why I don't actually have a hard date for them. But as we get those plans figured out, we will definitely share that, on the website, sort of what the roadmap looks like. And then also, again, the Trust Center is the source of truth for all of these across Microsoft. So we'll share those plans as we get them locked down for sure.
And if you have specific projects that would need that, you can ping that preview programs alias we just put up a second ago and let us know. Because then at least when we're looking at those data centers, we can potentially pull you in.
The gentleman up front here was...
Is there any risk at this point of extending the CDS? So like if I extend the sales order entity, when you update it, is there a risk of my
No, so you as a customer right now, because we don't have like the ISV packaging story, so we basically put you in your own namespace and manage your extensions and customizations completely separately. So even if by chance we named everything the same way, they won't collide. Yeah,
exactly.
We separate them. So while it might create some confusion, we don't do that. And at the moment, we're not doing any breaking changes. So we're not removing anything from the model at the moment, and we're not removing any relationships. So everything that we do is supposed to be a supportive, additive change moving forward. Look, as the service grows and as requirements change, that may come one day, but we'll make sure that there's basically an operation for you to choose what you take and how you upgrade and things like that.
And that's the key part.
Yeah.
There would be a path forward. We do communicate the new fields, the new relationships, and so you would know, we introduced that particular field, and you could do a migration over into it if so desired.
Yeah. But at the moment, no. There's no, we have majority of our CDS instances at the moment have customizations, either extended entities or new entities. And like I said, we do upgrades basically every 2 weeks and monitor those quite closely. Okay.
Firewall.
I can take it?
You want to? Okay,
yeah, yeah. So the question was, is it an Azure SQL database? 2 answers to that. Technically, yes. But it's best not to think about it that way.
That's why in none of the slides did we talk about SQL Azure actually being the thing under the hood.
The CDS is supposed to be thought of as a service for your data. The reason I say that is we're researching things at the moment like virtual entities. We're looking at things like a graph database so that we can support graph modeling of data rather than relational. We're looking at document data storage rather than relational. So the most likely progression of the CDS service is that there will be multiple technologies in the background holding your data, and you as an ISV or as an administrator or as a consumer should not have to worry about the technical underpinning of that data. You will model your data in the most appropriate way and choose the entity type that you need, whether the service physically puts that in a SQL relational store or a graph database or a document database. We won't be, our logic, our expressions, basically our security will all sit the level above that, so it shouldn't be impacted. So technically, yes, you run in a Azure SQL database at the moment, but that's not always going to be the case as the grows. So the question was, is there a storage capacity limitation? As John had mentioned before, that's an evolving story at the moment. At the moment, we have some customers using it very heavily, some light, some high volume, and we scale in the background to support that, depending on the usage. But it will evolve into us having a a more clearly defined story around that and premium offerings and things like that for people that want to store high volumes of data. Sorry, can you repeat the question? Sorry, I missed that again. Oh, data archival. Sorry, the question is how do we deal with data archival? At the moment, we don't do anything.
Well, so can I double check? When you say data archival, do you mean business
Pulling it out.
continuity or do you mean a warehouse of sorts where you're storing, just to be clear?
Yes. So at the moment, no. But it's an area that's being explored, and there are multiple sort of technical implementations of how we can go down that path. It's a problem we know we need to get to, but as we're only 6 months in as a service, it's an issue we haven't had to hit just yet. So it's on the list. Okay.
And I just want to tack on one thing. Going back to the question from earlier, the way we will model our interactions with you, applications, and customers is there are entities in the data model, and there's capacity limits to how you interact with them. For example, even though we happen to use SQL Azure, there's no direct connectivity from an application to it. You come through our APIs, through our SDKs, and then that's where our promises around the SLA for amount of transactions, all those things. That's what we'll model our capacity with the applications and customers on. That's why it doesn't really, we don't expose the fact that we happen to right now be using SQL Azure for some things. And also, we'll optimize the heck out of things for scenarios like cross-entity queries and such, which shouldn't impact your application or your capacity. We're doing things to provide the best possible experience. So that's why we try to keep it very abstract and say you have entities, there's a certain type of storage that we tell you you're using up, and there's files and such, and that's what you see without understanding what's under the hood by design.
We can do one more.
Yes.
Does anyone that hasn't asked a question yet? It's all the repeats now. Okay. There you go.
Yeah, there you are.
You can have it.
So, after talking about CDS quite a bit, you haven't mentioned SSIS. Is that the mechanism that it's using for the data to travel between the two apps? What is the mechanism for data packages to transfer?
So, in the same way that we don't talk about SQL Azure under the hood, SSIS is actually, just to be totally transparent, a core part of our data movement strategy. There's a whole group, a peer group of ours, who, if you've used Power BI connectors, that's in the M query language, they own all of that, and we work with them. They build that core infrastructure so that as a company, we're doing it once, right, as best as possible. So yes, SSIS is actually used under the hood. Again, you don't see that as a customer. You set up your data project, which has templates, and that defines what flows where. Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much,
Yeah,
everybody.
thank you, everyone. Enjoy the conference.